Hello, world. What's up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build Studio in New York City. Our next guests have sold more than 23 million albums to date, have toured the world several times over, and this year celebrate the 20th anniversary of their double platinum album, Make Yourself. And what better way to celebrate than with a 39-city tour that kicks off this September? Here to tell us all about it, ladies and gentlemen, Incubus is here. How about that? You guys excited? Incubus right here. There you go, the best. Gentlemen, congratulations, literally everything, but specifically this tour, 20 years of incredible success. It's so exciting to have you guys here. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, man, of course. We're going to dive in. I'm really stoked to talk to you about the record and everything that you've been up to, but first and foremost, how's everybody doing? You had a great performance last night on Colbert. How'd that go?
It went about as well as it could go, I suppose.
Yeah, those things happen very quickly.
Yeah.
Especially live television. It's like there's this huge, like, full day-long build-up to it, and then it's like one song, and you're done.
That's it, yeah.
One chance.
It's so funny. I saw, I think you guys had just posted, it was fun and scary.
I posted that,
Yeah, that's right. That's what we saw. It was fun and scary.
I think that's what makes it kind of infinitely compelling to me as a singer, because it's like you're controlling this tiny little area of your body right here. It's like, okay, you're live. Millions of people, go. Don't mess up. Go. And so it's like, it is really fun, but it's also kind of terrifying. And we've done it countless times, but it's still kind of terrifying, you know?
They're not usually live anymore.
I know. Usually we pre-tape and then it's like live, but last night was actually live.
Yeah.
Live.
It's like 80s live.
Yeah.
Like 80s live. It doesn't happen.
That's what's so interesting about it, and why I bring it up is because you guys have been doing this for a minute, and so for it to still be scary, for it to still be a nervousness going into a scenario like that, you've played stadiums, you've played massive crowds.
Yeah.
But that moment, something about live, something about the cameras.
Well, no, it's not even that. I always have a little bit of that. It's like I'm happily terrified when we're on tour. There's a little bit of a constant, like, it's like you're holding your breath just a little bit. And there's something that is not good about that because you can only hold your breath for so long, metaphorically speaking. But there's something really wonderful about it too, because in a way it kind of keeps you on your toes. Yeah. And we've never really had a chance to get complacent in almost 30 years of being a band. And part of it's because we've been sort of on tour a lot over that period of time. So it's mostly good, I think. There's a little bit of a downside, but it's mostly good.
Things can fall apart at any moment.
But that's what's awesome about it.
Yeah. So I mean, and it still happens after so long. It's just how quickly you can recover. You know what I mean, and keep going. But
we all have dreams about it. Everybody in the band,
drums falling apart, or whatever.
Because those things have actually happened in real life.
100%.
The drums have fallen apart mid-performance?
One of the first shows, one of the first shows we ever did, and whose backyard was that? Somewhere in like 1992.
Someone's.
I forget.
We don't remember.
When I ran around the drum kit.
Yeah, Jose liked to do this thing where he would there was like a break in one of the 3 songs that we had written in 1992, and there was a break in one of the songs, and he would get up and like do a lap around his kit, and then sit back down and land on the one, and it didn't work. Like you kicked over the drum.
Yeah, everything fell over.
I think you were on the pot.
I might have been.
And that might
crazy old days
contributed to it.
That's one of those things where if you land it, it is super cool, but if you don't, you talk about it for 30 years.
It's all or nothing, for sure.
YouTube is just like replete with examples of this. I see all these drum videos on YouTube of dudes doing like fancy things like in between drum solos, and the whole thing just going to pieces. And yeah, that's what we're dealing with. It's like any moment this could all fall apart. So once again, that's what makes it fun.
Does.
Yeah.
And you point out, like, YouTube being, that's kind of a newer element to it, at least back then in that guy's backyard. That story just lives on in memory. You didn't have a video of it.
There are no videos.
There's no evidence, yeah.
Luckily.
Anyway.
We're really lucky, sorry to interrupt, we're really lucky that we grew up in a time before the internet with our band, because we'd be in a lot of trouble.
Probably in jail, for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of it, isn't it? That stuff is just part of the mythos now. It's just there.
Yes, yes. It makes it a unique experience to be a band that's still working and touring and making music. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, does he have a Nine Inch Nails onesie?
That's awesome.
So cute.
Oh,
We need to start making things.
what's
like
the little one's name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the little one's name?
Nolan.
Oh, Nolan.
Nolan,
What's up,
bud?
Nolan?
Me too, Nolan.
Nolan
There
has
you
a
go.
strong head of
There you
hair.
go.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about before we get into why "Make Yourself" was such a pivotal record and why it's so important, especially in the larger story of Incubus. Real quick, the tour, we're almost there. It's like almost practically tomorrow. It's a couple of months away. It's super close. Have you guys kicked the dust off all the songs? Like, there's a bunch you've been playing, but there's got to be some stuff that was a little rough to go back to and relearn and figure out. Are you feeling good about the set list now?
We haven't done any of that yet.
No, you haven't done any of it yet.
We kind of have. We've played through it a couple of times.
We haven't done any of it yet. We're stop stunting, Brandon.
I'm wishful thinking.
That's what we're gonna do next. See, what happened was we're gonna that's next. Like, we've been playing shows and recording new songs, and we've been busy with lots of different stuff, and so we kind of set aside some time before the tour starts to really dig in and like work up what we're gonna do on this upcoming tour, but that hasn't happened yet. So it's kind of like we know it's coming, and people are like, "Oh, you're excited for the tour?" It's like, yeah, we don't know if we can pull it off yet. So I think we can, but
I'm gonna go back to the original theme. That's kind of half the fun.
Yeah.
Just
Set
don't
a bar,
know.
and
Yeah.
you hope, you think
Exactly.
maybe, yeah, and you work for it.
what was easy 20 years ago is hard now.
Well, that's just it. I mean,
True.
I'm really fascinated at the idea of you guys revisiting these tracks. I mean, that record was born kind of out of your experiences of touring on Science and everything. And I'm like now going back to that music with this 20 plus years of new experience and stuff in the rear view. It's like, what's that going to be like? What is that challenge to go back to those tracks? You don't know yet because that comes next.
Well, we've played most of those songs over the years, so it's I'm not predicting it's going to be that crazy for us, but hey, you never know until you do it.
Is there one
right?
in particular you're like, that's going to be a bitch?
Several.
Yeah?
Actually, not that much.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's like some of the songs we've played a lot over the years, and then others we kind of have just not played as many times. And I think it'll be really fun to dig into those songs and kind of work them up, because we get used to playing certain songs over and over and over again. There's kind of a passive comfort that happens when you get to that place. But every time we do something new that we haven't done for a while, it feels good to like do something different. So this is going to be fun, and it's going to be more intimate. We're playing smaller venues than we normally would, and it's just it's going to be cool.
Have you guys decided if you're going to do the record front to back in its entirety yet, or are you still figuring out if that makes sense, or if you want to mix it up or swirl it around?
That's kind of the hope. I think that's sort of our loose plan, is to approach the record from front to back. I just feel like it would be really fun and special to just almost like push play on it,
Exactly.
but throw in the chaos element of the live atmosphere and all the moving parts and everything. One of the interesting things about revisiting these songs, like Michael was saying, we've played many of them a lot over the years on tour, and a lot of our sets have become almost absent when we don't play them. Something feels absent, but there was probably half the record that we really haven't touched, and we played it once or twice in our rehearsal studio back in California. We played the whole record through recently, and it was so interesting to experience that kind of that visceral emotion that was there when we first wrote these songs, and have it still be so present and just right behind the curtain 20 years later. It's one of the most amazing things about music, is that it has that capacity. Like, you can hear a song
Transports you.
for the first time in sometimes a couple of decades, and it puts you right back to where you were when you first heard it, or the first time it really resonated with you. And it's an incredible thing. So it's really such a rad, strange blessing to be able to make music and then have people actually want to hear it 20 years later.
Pretty nuts.
Let's go back 20 years.
I was taking a look through the Incubus subreddit, which is a pretty active community, and a
What
lot of
did you
people.
just say? What?
You're familiar with Reddit?
I've
You've
never
heard of
been
Reddit?
on it before, but I
You've
don't.
never been on Reddit?
No, there's many parts of the internet that
Yeah, we
frighten
hear
me.
about it all the time.
There's good and bad parts.
It's like,
anything.
is it like a chat
We know it
room?
exists.
Kind
we know
of.
it's there.
People can post things and then they kind of talk about it and have discussions and stuff like that. Sometimes it's really great. Sometimes it gets really ugly real fast. But
It's
that's
just a
the
trash
internet.
talk
It's-
forum, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Not necessarily, but it can devolve into that.
Sure.
But there's a lot of like moderators and stuff to keep it kind of on the
Oh,
rails.
there are, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not a perfect system, but again, what is? Anyway, the point is, I was going through there, and a lot of people talking about like what "Make Yourself" means to them, like what the tracks mean, what the music means, what the title itself means. And I'm curious, as you were going back and playing it in the room, what did it mean to you back then, and have you found that it's changed at all 20 years later? That it means something else now?
It's a really good question. I mean, there's a lot of what it meant to us back then. I think that still holds true. But then we have 20 years of a lot of personal growth, collective growth, traveling a lot. Travel has a tendency to simultaneously round you out and kind of confuse you. I think, and it's essentially a good experience to have. But yeah, when we were writing that record, we were just in our kind of early 20s, and we had just traveled around the world a couple of times for the first time, and things were really exciting and things were looking up for us in a lot of ways, but then there were parts of the experience that we were learning about. I can speak for myself here, where it's like the life that I had started to create at home in Los Angeles was kind of falling apart because I had been so absent to it from just dedicating everything to just traveling and playing music and stuff. So there was a lot of the lyrical stuff in Make Yourself was, I think, learning how to be a man for the first time in my experience, and hence the term Make Yourself, like coming into one's own and make yourself attempting to understand one's experience in amongst chaos. So in our sense, it was like being thrust onto the world stage for the first time, and like, is this fun or is this terrifying? Back to our original theme once again. But yeah, so there's some of it that still holds true for sure, and there's some of it that has evolved a little bit as well.
Yeah, for me, I think just the themes in general, I think we have a pretty, what Brandon kind of writes about, I think it's very relatable, and and for the most part, very hopeful and optimistic in my point of view. So I think for me, it still stands, a lot of the challenges and things that I experienced back then, I still do in a different context now, So I think it's applicable very much so today as it was 20 years ago, And I think that's the great thing about music, is that things that have that sort of hope and outlook, I try to continue to look in that sort of perspective my whole life. That's the hope. So it's still to this day very relevant to me and exciting still to play these songs after so long. And that's I don't think that you can say that about everything you do. 20 years ago, what I was wearing, I definitely would not wear now. But the music that we play, I'm still excited to play that.
That's really one of the things that dates us the most. How when we see pictures from that era, it's like
hair and
pants. Yeah.
It's also just
Shirts come and go.
Yeah,
Hair and
exactly.
Pants, really. is what they call
Definitely.
it.
it's really remarkable that or to me at least, that the music that we made then 20 years ago actually really connected with people, and it connected with people on a global scale, which is something that I think the older that we get, the further away from that we get, the more sort of unbelievable that is to do that. There's no, it all seemed logical at the time we wrote those songs. It was like, oh, if we write this music and we're gonna put it out and people are gonna like it and people are gonna connect with it. And
do you remember we kind of thought we were like, our fans are gonna, our fans that we had, which was like a few thousand people from Science, they're like, they're gonna hate this record.
We
kinda
knew we knew that we were asking a lot of our audience at that time when we put those songs out, because it was just a different a different type of songwriting, at least in terms of like our maturity as musicians and songwriters. There was a pretty big leap from what had come before that, but it all felt logical at the time. It seemed to fit in place, but now looking back on it, it's like there's nothing that says that you're gonna put an album out and it's gonna sell many millions of copies all over the world and people are gonna connect with it. That's definitely not a given thing. And the fact that happened, it blows my mind.
I'm always
Still does.
I'm always interested. Sorry to interrupt, Mike. In Ben Kenny's perspective, because you weren't in the band at that point, and Ben joined the band in 2003, and so we talked to him occasionally. It's like, did you know about our band? You know, what did you think? Like, what were your
the
opinions?
objective point of view.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Ben his perspective.
It's yeah. Where's the exit, man? No. It's really cool because I get to see it from the outside and then kind of live with it. I've been playing the songs. Sorry, rough morning. I've been playing the songs for 16 years and kind of grew into them myself, but I kind of still have the outsider perspective. So it's just cool to see, you know, it's really.
Interesting.
He really didn't like us very much. That's what that translates. That's what that translates into. Hey Ben, will you join our band?
How much time do we have? Got a couple hours?
Maybe. I'll think about it.
I was always, and I think a lot of Incubus fans were always sort of fascinated with that leap that you mentioned from Science to Make Yourself. I mean, longtime fan, I have a soft spot for Science, but I think Make Yourself was really where you guys made a decision and sort of defined the sound, like find Incubus, you know, and discover. Was that? It sounds like it was pretty organic, but was it a mandate going in? This is going to be the record where we figure out what we sound like and when we move forward, or no?
No, it was, and I've said this before. It was our first time writing songs after sort of becoming citizens of the world. Like we traveled all over the world for the first time for a couple of years, touring, playing music in front of people that were not our fans. And when you do that, if you're an artist of any kind, that's when you actually really come into your own. I think everything we did up until that point, which was like, you know, the album Fungus Among Us is just demos that we made when we were in high school. Yeah. It's like those were the first songs we ever wrote. And then the Enjoy Incubus EP and then Science, that was kind of like, at least in my mind, like all of that music kind of fits together in a certain way because we hadn't really done the real thing yet. Yeah. Like we hadn't really traveled around the world and played music in front of people that didn't know who we were. Like everything that happened up until that point, mostly, at least at least until we recorded Science, was more like a local sort of thing. And then after traveling the world, it's like, oh, we were in Japan and we were in Australia and we were in South America, we were in, you know, Europe, and it changes your perspective on everything. So I think that's the answer.
Really, when you're in front of people who could care less about what you were doing, and you see this. Waiting for the band that they came to see. And we saw that countless times. So I'm actually not exaggerating. That was like the mellow version of what we saw. There were all manner of things thrown at us, and it definitely rounds you out. It makes you think. I don't think it changed our, like, oh, we can't play this kind of music because people don't like it. It was more just like, okay, this doesn't have the same effect. So there were all these kind of cues that we took from every place that we went. And by the time we came home and we got back into the studio and started to write what became Make Yourself, the perspective, I think, had naturally just shifted. And we had also just grown up a couple of years, too. Yeah. I think there's probably something boiling under the surface that you want to happen, which is in any art form, any modality, you want to eventually stumble across your own identity as an artist. And with Fungus Among Us, Enjoy Incubus, Science, like Mike was talking about, it was a much more secluded experience in that we hadn't left Los Angeles, and we were still very heavily kind of channeling our deepest influences. So it was like Primus and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Mr. Bungle and still obsessed with all of those bands, but it's like you can really hear, it's like, oh, these guys are super influenced by A, B, C, and D, E, F, G, H, J, K, L, M, O, P. And then by the time we started writing Make Yourself, it was like we were coming into like young manhood and discovering, I think, who we were as a collective identity and individually. And you can see it when you kind of look at it from one album to the next. And I think that one of the amazing things about, for us as artists in our process, was that it sort of set a precedent. We took such a big leap of faith. It's like, this record doesn't sound anything like anything we've done. People are probably going to hate it. Go, put it out there. And so, but we understood that there, in great risk, there is the potential for great reward. So every record since then has been kind of vastly different than the next. They've all kind of held little pieces of each album we've ever done. There are little elements of science in like every Incubus record. There's a through line. But there are some like larger and larger leaps away every time.
But I think it felt right though. Like when we were writing it and going into it, it just felt right, and we kind of like, well, I don't know, it's kind of a different departure, whatever it is. We just kind of see it through because it feels right to us.
Does it feel good?
Yeah, exactly. And so we just kind of go with our intuition, and we've been lucky that people follow us on that journey.
How much of a song do you guys like to have like locked down, written before you go into a room and press record and go to a studio and start tracking a record?
It used to be
All of it.
All of it?
We'd like to have all.
Oh, we'd like to have all.
It doesn't always work that way though.
it used to be a much more well-defined process where we would just sort of sequester ourselves and write, and then we would record. But technology has changed so much now to where like there's just a massive blur between, like, we'll start recording things kind of immediately, and some of what we record really early on will get carried over into, or we'll sort of make it through to the final stages. Like, there are songs that we've written where, Brandon's recorded vocals by himself at his house, like as a demo that just ended up being the thing. Like, that was it. That ended up being everything else ended up being replaced around that. But, and it's like that with everything. Sometimes it starts off that way with guitars or drums or whatever. And so now recording is such an easy thing to do that it's actually made the process a lot more dynamic in certain ways and more collaborative, because it's like, oh, you can record this at your house and send it over to me, and I'll do it at my house, and then you can do this, and then we'll do some stuff in the studio. It's just, it's more colorful in a certain way, but there's also a side of, I think, all of us that probably misses, like when you had the tape machine, it's like that was the only way music got onto that tape, is like someone had to hit record, and you couldn't, there wasn't an infinite amount of plugins that you could play with, and all these other things that we mess around with now that can actually just be a massive distraction.
Well, that's just it. Do you find anything at this point when you're doing that, you're in that process, you're in that zone? Do you allow yourself time to find stuff by accident, or do you go in very deliberate, like, I'm trying to achieve this sound or this vibe?
Most of it's by accident, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is the process that I was talking about, where it all kind of, there is no well-defined writing/recording. It all blends together. That, the spontaneity lends itself really well to that type of process.
I feel like this band, Incubus, and with just maybe a small handful of other bands who are still around, we occupy kind of an interesting space culturally, in that and part of it's because of when we were born and when we grew up and when we came of age and started making music. It's like the first quarter of it was fully analog. Yeah. There was no internet. We were recording to tape. We were recording on like 4-track recorder and then 16-track, and then so we had that experience of like very analog, do-it-yourself, DIY, get in the van, and then the sort of second half of our career has been, we're living like the digital world. And so we have an interesting perspective, like I said, but as well as like a handful of other bands, where it's like we started in the most traditional sense of just a band of friends in a garage, a high school band, and then just kept going. But now the world has changed so dramatically, and we're not we're not young anymore. I think you can tell by looking at us, but we're also not like old yet either.
We're working our way up to that.
Between phase.
Don't let
Middle
the gray
age.
fool you. Yeah, but so it's I jokingly refer to it as it's either we're youngish or oldish, depending on the day. Today I'm feeling a little oldish, but
She's smiling over there.
yeah. You guys.
Yeah. You're oldish.
There's a million things I want to keep asking you guys, but I want to make sure we leave time. We got some fan questions and a Twitter question. We're going to get there in 1 second. One last thing I want to bring up before we move on to the next stuff. In 2012, you guys founded the Make Yourself Foundation.
2003.
Was it 2003? Oh, my gosh. Somebody correct Wikipedia right now. So in 2003, you guys founded the Make Yourself Foundation. That makes this all the more amazing. So tell me about what inspired you guys to do that and why, at that point, you decided to title it Make Yourself. Why?
I'll start with the second part of your question. We called it the Make Yourself Foundation. I think we played with a bunch of other titles, but we understood, I think, as a band that album and what it stood for thematically was kind of a relatively strong statement, and that's probably why we titled it that. I suppose that's probably a pretty good summation of that. But the reason we started it, there's a few. Like, we had been doing some charitable work as a band, volunteering time and donating money here and there to like causes that were kind of near and dear to our heart around where we grew up, like the Surfrider Foundation and Heal the Bay. And then after doing a few events and things like that, it started to feel like our efforts were a little bit disparate, like they were kind of spread a little thin, and there must be a better way that we can kind of utilize our energy and our resource to help in some capacity. So when in 2003 we had a relatively large platform to shout from, a relatively loud megaphone. So we took the opportunity to start this nonprofit and act as a fundraising area and work with listeners of our band to raise funds and raise awareness for other nonprofits that were dear to our hearts, but also near and dear to your hearts and to our listeners' hearts. So over the past 16 years, we've raised quite a lot of money, and we've done countless grants to not only environmental nonprofits, but also humanitarian, food-based charities. Just basically, it's our way of like just trying to do something to help make the world a better place.
That was the thing that was mind-blowing reading. It was not just the amount of money, it was millions and millions, and it was the scope of humanitarian efforts and what you guys had reached out and the lives you impacted and touched. I thought it was a beautiful thing. I wanted to spotlight it before we went to the audience. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
You guys did that together and you put that effort in there, man.
If people don't know about it and they're interested, they can go to makeyourselffoundation.org, and they can see a really detailed, long list of all the nonprofits that we've worked with over the years and ways that they can get involved too. And we still, to this day, do our donations based on people will buy tickets to like a VIP meet and greet to come to the concerts. So it's very like piecemeal. It's like one by one by one. And so when they get this meet and greet package, they come and meet us before the show. We arm wrestle, we high five, we have a lovely glass of wine and commiserate about politics and things like that. Then they get like the best seat in the house. They get a special piece of merchandise, but 100% of their donation goes to the Make Yourself Foundation and all these charities. So it's a proper nonprofit.
It's cool, man. But the band, your music, you mentioned the optimism earlier. The Incubus has always meant that. It's always meant optimistic. It's always meant love. It's always been that vibe. I thought that was a really cool extension of that, to take what you feel from the music you've made and how you can put it back into the world. It's a cool thing. All right, I could do this all day, but you guys got questions as well, so let's get to them. The first one is from Twitter, and it's at AshMCQ21. When writing melodies, do you have a specific process? What are some ways that you come up with hooks?
That is such a good question. I honestly don't know how it works on a very kind of like
I can tell you how it works.
Well, like Mikey,
I can tell you how I've seen you
do it. Hit me with it.
So normally, there's like some kind of musical idea and like a guitar riff or something, and then Brandon goes in the other room for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then comes back and sings something, and that's it.
Voila.
What's
Sorry, I
in
don't
the
have a
other
better
room?
answer, but that's
Well,
what it is.
I don't know how to read music or like write music. It's like a different language, and it's so funny because it's a language that I speak relatively fluently, but it's like I'm illiterate of the language. But there's like
You're not illiterate.
there's a magic in there.
It's a reactive process.
It's a reactive process. So Michael or the guys will like show me some kind of like Mike's an incredible guitar player. You know, I'm blessed to play in a band with like really amazing creative musicians, and they'll show me something, and I'm like, I love that. Give me a minute, you know, and then I go off and maybe in my car, there's a whole other conversation to be had about music originating from Los Angeles and car culture, because we have these like soundproof little capsules that we spend a lot of time in every day. A lot of songs get written in the car.
Do you ever get tripped up since you self-proclaimed illiterate musician, do you ever get tripped up? I think it was like, I want to say Make Yourself, the track itself, in the beginning you alternate between 7 and 8. When they mess with time signature, when they do anything that would be deemed experimental or whatever, did that ever trip you up when you were trying to find your way in as a vocalist?
I've always loved when Michael or Jose or Ben or Chris hand me something that is not 4/4. I love 4/4, but I love when I don't understand the signature at first, because I think my illiteracy, we'll use that word, of music creates an interesting combustion between those things. Yeah. I'll do like the wrong thing over the time signature, but then like figure it out and make the wrong thing work. And then Mikey will come back and be like, I don't know why you did that, but I like it.
I mean, it's such a subjective thing, and everyone hears different things in music. And Brandon's our process has usually been, you know, like a reactive one, where like I'll make something and then hand it over to him, and he'll react to it and then hand it back to me, and then I'll react to that, and then these guys all react to it too. And but everyone's literate in their own way. Like, you know, when I studied music, like in an academic environment,
Good
and what I realized is that people just call things different things. Like, everybody who makes music is literate in their own, they speak their own language with how they describe these things. And like, being a literate musician is really just about like knowing what you call stuff. And it just makes it easier to communicate ideas to other people. But we have our own language that we use in the band for stuff, so it works for us, you know. And we have a pretty strange language too with certain things, and it's resulted in some pretty weird music at times.
There's a lot of giggling going around the idea of strange language. Are you guys thinking of something in particular, something specific?
So many things. Part of it, which is so kind of fun and seemingly like mystical, is that it's largely psychic. There's a large psychic communication that is happening, a non-verbal communication when we're in the room together or when we're on stage. And we kind of learn to take it for granted, but when you really step back from it and look at it, it's like they're communicating very successfully without saying anything to each other. It's a lot of like...
It truly is like just a strong connection where you don't have to verbalize anything. You just put us in a room with our instruments and things just start happening.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think that happens with everyone or with with our group. I think it's very strong, and it just happens naturally. And I think it's been pretty amazing that still to this day, it's like we get excited to do that, to get in a room together with our instruments and let that process just sort of naturally unfold.
Ben, was that really weird to walk into for you when you came into the band?
Not at all. It's something that I've experienced in other situations. When you get the right group of people together and they can actually communicate without words, it becomes a thing, and it exists in different places, and it's so comfortable because I don't really like to deal with words that much. So being able to speak with my buddies every day without having to talk is awesome.
Well said.
Yeah, for a man who doesn't like words, you sure know how to use them. That was great, Ben. Thank you. Kate, do I have time for a few more? Let's do 2 more. Next question. Go for it. Microphone right here.
Hi, I'm Jordan, longtime listener, first-time caller. You guys have inspired thousands of bands and artists around the world the last 3 decades. I'm curious if you have any up-and-coming or new artists who are inspiring you creatively to write.
Good question.
There's so many. Right now is the craziest time for music. Every week there's a new band that comes off like satellite radio or something. It's like, whoa. And it really feels like younger people are fearless with what they're doing. As far as artists, it's hard to call them up on the spot. But I know there was a song by Thugly, who is a duo that I heard the other day, and it blew my mind. I was like, this is beautiful. It's called Stuck in Nirvana, and I had that song on loop for like probably 2 weeks now, thinking like, wow, these guys are on a different level.
I've been obsessed with this band called Methyl Ethyl. Have you heard them? They have a new record out. I think it's called Triage. It's really good. It's very, and to your point exactly, it's like there's a generation of musicians that are coming out, and Methyl Ethyl's been around for a minute, but they seem to me a product of this like almost lovingly defiant generation of musicians. Like they do not need anybody's permission to do what they're doing, and they have, because of the access that technology has given us, it's just like, just throw it out there and let sort of the vast democratization of the world decide what's good and what's not. So yeah. Anything for you guys?
I mean, it's amazing what the younger generation is doing. It's especially little Nolan over there.
Look at him
Nolan's
checking
the
us out on
next
TV.
generation. He's making music already. He's got amazing little ham hocks. Look at those.
Dude, that gives me
They're doughy.
seeing his binky, what do you call it? His passy attached to his shirt. Somebody should make like a waterproof microphone binky.
Yeah.
So you can like amplify the put like echoes on it and stuff.
Like Nolan has access to stuff that we would never have access to, and he's gonna do some amazing stuff.
Yeah, listen to Nolan.
Let's get a mic on Nolan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy, though, because you're right. In the way that you guys sort of came up analog and then sort of had to adapt to digital, we're only kind of now really starting to see people that have grown up full digital and what like that's yielding, like what that's giving us culturally and musically, which is pretty interesting time. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to give the younger generation really like give them a chance, like to be understood by the older generation. That's like something that I think there's just a lot of like the older people are always like, oh, this is just like what
Our
the
way's
young
better.
people are. Yeah, they're always dismissing the younger generation, and the thing is like the younger people, like all the stuff that was so meaningful to us when we were young, like the stuff they're doing now is that's that time that they're in. So you know, like I really feel like if we don't embrace what they're doing, like it will just get passed by. That's how you become really irrelevant quickly.
One more? Let's do one more. Would love to do it. Let's go. Microphone, one more.
Hey guys, name's Joe. Long time fan. Love you guys.
Thank you.
Quick question is, what really pushed the needle for you guys to do this Make Yourself tour? Because then you guys were talking about it for like a year almost, and then you guys just decided to do it. So excited about it.
For me, it was sort of like fan pressure. Are you guys doing it? Is that accurate?
Yeah. Well, we have this discussion all the time, and we kind of go through this process even when we're just, you know, touring in general. We're trying to find a balance between sort of honoring the music that we created that's been around for a long time, and also keeping ourselves entertained with like new things and new ideas and new songs and new music.
Which we have stuff coming out very soon, by the way.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
About that, yeah.
But like, I don't know, Make Yourself was such a pivotal period and album and everything for us. I think we all just wanted to put a spotlight on it, and fan pressure too. Like that all plays into it. But it's a fan pressure that we appreciate in new ways, being, you know, 2019 and people actually still care. Yeah. Like that to us is like, wow, okay.
We should probably go out and play some shows for this record, because if they still like it 20 years later, that's a good sign.
Yeah. What we're doing now, they might not like 20 years later. So let's appreciate what we did 20 years ago that people still like. So we're happy for that.
No, we have new music coming out, and it's pretty awesome. It's some of it is as big a leap from science to make yourself as like the more recent stuff will be to now, but some of it also has some very clear through lines to like every era of music that we put together. So we're pretty excited about it.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank all you guys for being an amazing audience and hanging out with us and asking some great questions. Crushed it. You guys crushed it. I want to thank you guys. Obviously, this was super cool. Really amazing to have you here. Remind the world out there, if you haven't yet, head over to incubushq.com for dates and tickets. It's 39 cities. One of them's going to be yours. All right, so go ahead and get yourself a ticket if you haven't already to see the show. Keep an eye out for the new music. You guys are teasing it a lot. Any date range soon? A week, a month? What do you think?
It'll be in about 3 weeks. The first single will come out.
3 weeks. There we go.
But consecutive singles will be coming out shortly thereafter. So we're kind of sidelining the album format for a minute. We're just going to release songs every couple of months.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. There we go. That's fantastic. Guys, one more time. I want a ridiculous amount of noise because this is Incubus right here. Do it up. Come on. Thank you.